Hello, can anyone hear me? Hello, I don't know if anyone can hear me. Hello, I don't know if anyone can hear me. Is anyone hearing me? Please, I need you to identify if you're hearing me, please, so that I can actually go on. Sorry, if anyone can hear me, I need you to identify so that I can actually move forward. Can anyone hear me? I don't know if anyone can hear me. Please, I need a confirmation so that I can move forward. Please, I need a confirmation so that I can move forward. Hello. Please, I don't know if anyone can hear me. I need a confirmation. If anyone can hear me, please. Okay. Okay, I think we've got to. You should go on. I think you should go on. Please go on.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know, Ezekiel, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm getting you.
All right, okay, yeah. I don't know if Lisa have joined the call. Hello, Ezekiel. Hello, Ezekiel. Is Lisa on the call?
Hi, Rifkatu. Can you hear me? Hi, colleagues. Good evening.
Good evening, Ma.
Good evening, ma'am. You're welcome.
I don't know. I think she just muted her mic. I
Okay,
think
I
she just
don't know if
muted.
she can
I think she just
join.
muted her mic.
Okay, so
Yes,
can
good
I
evening, Ezekiel, and good evening, Rifkatu. I can hear you.
okay, good
Okay.
evening, ma. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so without wasting much time, I welcome us all to the weekly series
Well,
of on safeguarding. So without wasting much of our time, and I would like our listener to join us. Our listeners that are listening, I would like you to sit back and listen to the safeguarding specialist here with us today, our guest, and I should introduce herself before we continue. Over to you, Ma'am Lisa.
Okay, thank you very much, Rifkatu. Thank you, Ezekiel. Thank you, Aisha, and thank you, ZEGCAWIS, for this opportunity. My name is Lisa Daspan, and I work with Plan International Nigeria, and my role within the organization is the country safeguarding and PSHEA technical manager. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma, for the introduction. Also, without wasting much time, for the benefit of those that are joining us for the first time, please can you kindly give us a recap of what we actually did last week before we continue with our week question?
my system is about to fucking die. Sure.
Okay, hi, Ezekiel. Can you mute, please?
My system is about to die, guys.
Hello, Ezekiel, can you mute your mic, please? Yes, ma,
Okay,
you can continue.
Yes, thank you very much for that. So last week we looked at a lot of things. We defined safeguarding, and then we defined safeguarding as the responsibilities and as the duty of care, the moral and the legal responsibilities we have individually as staff of organizations that are providing humanitarian or development aid, whether we are government staff, whether we are CSO staff, whether we are NGO staff, whether we're with the military, or anyone tasked with the responsibility of providing some level of protection and assistance to affected populations. So we're saying within our organizations and individually as members of such organizations, we are mandated to do no harm. We're mandated to keep everyone that comes into contact with us as a result of our work, and then children, safe from every form of harm, whether negligent treatment, whether physical or violence, whether emotional violence, whether even all forms of sexual exploitation, harassment, and abuse. And we're saying that is a responsibility we have. And even though organizations have different mandates, and some organizations are more child centered, and as such, they prefer to bring particular attention to children, and in the context of child safeguarding, we recognize that every organization has the responsibility to do no harm to all program participants, irrespective of their age and their different intersecting identities. And then we proceeded to define child protection, which we say, is the prevention and response to all forms of violence, exploitation, neglect, and abuse to children. And we're saying, though these two streams are closely related, protection are all the things that we do externally to make the world a safer place, to make our communities safer for children and, by extension, the general population. But we're saying when we're talking about safeguarding, we are bearing responsibility, we are taking liability for that. What is beyond our control outside the organization, and which we have decided to respond to depending on what organization we work with and how we're involved in providing protection and assistance, like I mentioned earlier. We are saying that safeguarding is what we do where we take responsibility and have liability for any harm that comes into that anyone comes into contact with as a result of the association with us. And then we also looked at mainstreaming child safeguarding, safeguarding and child protection, particularly across sectors. And we said that when we're mainstreaming child protection across sectors, we are to involve children in their own protection, whether in safeguarding or in protection. We're saying there's nothing for them without them. So we're saying that we recognize that children and young people and program participants at large have the ability to assess and to define properly risk that they are affected by as a result of their involvement with the organization, and they are also well positioned to tell us how they can be better supported to mitigate any of this risk. So what we're saying in general is that even when we're designing safeguarding interventions, even when we have our organizational policies, we're to involve children and young people and program participants actively in the way that we manage risk, in the way that we take different actions to keep them safe. And then we're saying also for child protection, we're looking at the key principles of child protection, but we're saying beyond all that, the best interest of the child, participation, survival, and development, etc. We're saying for us, mainstreaming child protection lies critically on meaningful participation. And of course, when we talk about meaningful participation, we're talking about involving children meaningfully with respect to their that is appropriate to their age and capacity, and not tokenism, where we see that just for the sake of having children involved in our programming, we say, okay, we're inviting them, but we're not meaningfully engaging them. And we also looked at briefly also some rings of responsibility regarding child protection, where we talked about the child being in the center, peer networks also being the next layer of responsibility. In terms of providing a protective environment, we're saying that the child is at the center, and then the family is also there as the next protective ring to protect the child. The community also, by extension, moral and duty bearers also, by extension, have a responsibility also to provide a protective environment. Of course, we looked at the national and international framework as well, where we have different conventions and where we have responsibilities of government, at different levels to ensure that we are keeping children safe. And so we mentioned also that within the humanitarian space, we're also talking about meaningful engagement of children, also in terms of right from engaging children in design and assessment. We're also looking at how, in the first place, as much as possible, and throughout the program cycle, we are engaging children in data collection, in assessment, throughout that, the entire cycle from assessment, right to project closure, from design to planning to implementation to assessment, and then to program closure. So that is by way of summary what we talked about last week. I know we talked about also the fact that when we have safeguarding policies, these do not all automatically translate into appropriate action and appropriate behavior of humanitarian workers or development workers. But by way of summary, I would just like to stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma, for this quick recap you have given us. And so I guess our listeners who haven't joined us last week will have a background of what is going on and what we are trying and what the message we are trying to pass on this webinar. And so, based on the recap you just gave us, safeguarding and child protection is not humanitarian work only, but also as a person, each and everyone in the community it should be accountable for him or herself on protecting and safeguarding children and the vulnerable people. So, based on that, as the Plan International Safeguarding and Prevention from Sexual Exploitation and Abuse Manager, I know that you have worked with different cultures and traditions across the country. So can you please give us how do cultural differences impact the approaches to safeguarding and child protection?
Okay, thank you very much. So, first of all, the perception, let me start with, these are very broad terms. And I would also like to restate that even though safeguarding and child protection are closely related, with the intention to prevent harm to children, that is what all these interventions are about. But let's not forget that when we talk about safeguarding, we're talking about what is our responsibility as those that are tasked with, the mandates to provide protection and assistance, whether we're in the government, whether we're in the NGO, INGO, UN system, CSO, faith-based organizations, and different movements raising awareness about protection-related issues. And that protection is what is done in the community. So wherever we are, we cannot alienate ourselves from these two streams. But let me focus on safeguarding. When we talk about cultures in safeguarding, the first thing you would ask is, who are these people, that are meant to provide safeguarding to children and program participants? The same question you would ask, who are the potential perpetrators of safeguarding concerns? Because we all come from the society, we all come from, our various communities, and we come in to the communities with our perceptions on children and young people and even program participants. Meaning, before Lisa became a plant staff, she was a community member. So I'm the same person that transferred from the community to the organization, meaning that I would come with all the norms and all the perceptions and all the attitudes that are from the community right to the place of work. And what this means is that traditionally we know that, children are infantilized. There's no consultation with them. There's also a saying that children should be seen and not heard. So what that means for me is that if I come into an organization like Plan International or any other development organization that says we need to participate with, we need to ensure meaningful participation for children and young people, I may, whether unconsciously or consciously, bring ageism into play to say, for example, who are these people and why do I need to listen to them? Of course, I know what is best for them, and so on and so forth. So that is just giving one example about how my socialization, in turn impacts how I behave towards people within the organization. So when we talk about cultural barriers to safeguarding and PSHE, let me give an example how that one of the violations according to the ISAC core principles on PSA, we have the first thing that relationships with children under the age of 18 is absolutely prohibited, irrespective of the age of consent locally. So you see that depending on the age of consent and what is accepted by the majority, what we have already is in conflict. Our policies are in conflict with the local norms and the local practices and all that. Of course, when we come to issues of mandatory reporting as well, we have different concerns that make people not to report. So all these things are cultural barriers that have an impact on our work, whether they are SHEA or whether they are PSHEA or whether they are safeguarding, or even by extension just child protection programming within the community or general protection programming within the community. Again, because we have the culture of silence, it also becomes an issue when we say we have mandatory reporting, because that also becomes a challenge for someone when the person wants to report and then is in conflict with, oh, what would they say if they find out that I'm the one that made this report and all that. And of course, in certain cultures, girls and women lose their dowry value if they are associated with any form of sexual abuse or sexual relations before marriage. And because of this, families would prefer to hide signs and evidence of sexual abuse. All these that I've mentioned are not as heartbreaking for me as the fact that when we're talking about localization, and I absolutely support this drive, we could also have in quote, and of course in quote, because not everyone, but we could also have, even if it's a little percentage, persons that have these policies or adopt these policies because it is an organizational requirement, it is a partnership requirement, and that because of that we just have this to tick the box, and we're not ready to challenge the norms and cultures that contradict with human values and rights-based approach, and we end up perpetrating harm, whether intentionally or unintentionally, by failing to address all the cultural barriers that exist within the communities that are transferred back into the organization. Thank you. Hi, Rifkatu, did you hear me? I don't know if I managed to answer your question. Hi, Rifkatu, can you hear me?
Yes, ma, I hear you. You have said a lot. Sorry, I had issues with my network to unmute the mic, so I heard you very well, and you speak a lot concerning the cultural differences and challenges we have in our communities. So, as an advice for an organization or organization that are listening to us, what advice can you give for us as organization to navigate these challenges on cultural barriers?
Okay, thank you very much. So the thing about safeguarding is that we operate in a situation where we have control, and that is why whenever you say safeguarding and child protection, I'm quick to interrupt to say no. When we talk about safeguarding, is an entirely different thing. When we talk about child protection, is an entirely different thing. And with the understanding that we are still the ones that transfer between the external environment into the internal environment, what is very key is for us to have policies in the first place. But just like I earlier mentioned, we can have these policies and they end up being a tick box. So what can we do to address that? My candid advice would be for anyone that is a leader of an organization to say, you know what, if you are sincerely not ready to provide quality protection and you're into this humanitarian or development work for business, please just leave. There are many other ways that you can earn a living. There are many other ways that you can make money if you're not passionate about protecting the rights of people in all their diversity. Because this is where it starts from. If we don't have visible and committed leadership, like I mentioned during the last webinar, we would have these policies that would just to tick the box. We can even be the ones facilitating facilitating trainings for community members about this. But if we don't have visible and committed leadership, we would then have the first challenge. Okay, let's say that we have the head of the organization, the leadership of the organization, very passionate about ending all of this. What are the things that we need to do? Of course, we need to let people know that once you come into ZEGCAWIS, for example, there is a way that you must have been existing before then, but now this is a new way of living. Awareness and prevention is very key, so that all staff, are aware and understand the problem of abuse, not just the policy, but they understand how it is a problem. They understand inequality, they understand exclusion, they understand discrimination, and they really understand the impact of misuse of power and privilege. So what it means is that we're not telling people only to keep safe, only to have this policy so that you don't run into reputational risk for your organization, so that you don't lose funding. No, SA is not all about that. It's about the survival. So we need to understand, number one, the impact of safeguarding concerns, the impact of sexual harassment, exploitation, abuse, for us to be able to take decisive steps. So what that means is that every organization must be deliberate about analyzing the issue of power, the issue of privilege, and the issue of bias, whether conscious or unconscious bias. It is when we're able to have these conversations, where we're able to challenge these norms. And for us in Plan International, we operate a gender and responsive, an inclusive an intersectional lens to safeguarding and SHA as well. Because we're saying that people are not just people, but they are treated based on their intersecting identities. And because of this, a person may have some level of dominance and another person may have a sense of subordination depending on their intersecting identities. Of course, we talked about intersecting identities in the previous session, but permit me also by way of summary to say this is all the things that define a person as a person: their social identity, their age, their sexual orientation, their gender, their ability or disability, their ethnicity, their religion, and all of that. So what we're saying is that we have to be conscious about dealing with the issue of power, privilege, and bias, and challenging not just safeguarding concerns, but gender biases, all forms of discrimination within the organization. Because of course, charity begins at home. So if we're not able to have a healthy and a respectful culture for staff within the organization, then we would take that out back into the community. So what we are saying is that as soon as you come into the organization, yes, we have visible and committed leadership. Don't forget that what runs from the head would run down to the toes. So when our leaders are modeling the appropriate behavior and they are upholding the principles of safeguarding and our commitment to PSHE in their own work, every other thing begins to take shape. We're talking about also awareness and prevention. Then we're talking about reporting and responding, ensuring that we're having channels appropriate for reporting and responding after we've been able to let people know appropriately their duty of care to protect harm from children and program participants. Another thing we need to do is to ensure that children and program participants are aware of this policy. And of course, like we're talking about addressing cultural barriers, we know that because of our culture, like the things I would not want to repeat, which I just mentioned, people may not want to report some of these issues. And because of that, we need to be very, very deliberate. The change of behavior is the first thing. If we want to address the cultural barriers, we need to reflect on all this that I've talked about to ensure that we are behaving appropriately towards one another in the organization, towards children and program participants in the communities where we work. So I believe that if we are really reflecting on our issue, on the position of power and challenging some of the social and cultural norms that have come with to the organization, we're able to choose at that point, okay, this is what this organization stands for. Do I remain with them in this employment, or do I go? And that is where the issue of sanctions come in as well, because I can be in the community and I receive all the awareness and sensitization about um, child protection, for example, and yet nothing is being done. There's no consequence. So I keep on repeating that cycle of abuse. But why I started by saying for safeguarding, we have an opportunity to drive tremendous change is because for safeguarding, we have control. For safeguarding, it is related to policies. For safeguarding is related not only to policies, but to the laws of the land. What that means is that within the community, you can do something and get away with it if it is not reported. But that is why organizations have been deliberate to say that we are ensuring that mandatory reporting is part of our policy. So to say that when you come from the community with all the cultural barriers, we accept you the way you are. But when you come, we tell you that this is who we are. We respect people irrespective of their different intersecting identities. We respect people based on who they are as persons, and then give particular attention to the risk of vulnerabilities that they face, and we're managing that. So when we come into the organization and we're being clear that this is who we are, at that point we give people to choose. If, for example, you insist that you want to have a relationship with an 18-year-old, then fine and good, the organization is not for you. So what this means is that we must take advantage of the fact that we have control by the sanctions that are in place within our organizations and the mandatory reporting that we have to ensure that we're driving systems, we're ensuring that these things are working to ensure safety for children and program participants. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ma, for this. I actually like the part of you said of visible and committed leadership, where the leadership of the organization will make it known to anyone joining the organization. If they can't live with the policy, then they should leave. Thank you so much, Ma, for elaborating on this very well. I'm sure a lot of us, the communities, will take this will hold ourselves accountable to protect and safeguard children and the program participants we are working with. And giving example with Plan International, I've always seen you whenever I attend Plan International events, seeing you giving the safeguarding policies, even in a workshop or even a day workshop to the participants and program participants. So thank you so much, Ma, for the work you have been doing. So the next question I have for you here, as an organization, we are working with a lot of people in the community. This question is particularly goes around child protection. We work in the community, and a lot of people see that sometimes child protection concern is acts of discipline the child and the rest. So what are the strategy can our organization use to raise awareness and educate people in the community about child protection?
Okay, thank you, Rifkatu, for your question. Apologies, at some time you were breaking, so I didn't hear you very clearly. Please, can you come over that again?
Okay, thank you so much, Ma, for that. I said, as an organization, we work with a lot of communities, not only ZEGCAWIS, Plan International, a lot of organizations, INGOs, UN are working with communities. So whenever we are having a program and when there's an issue of child protection concern is being raised in our community, most of the people in the communities take it as child to discipline the child. Like, let me give example. If you go to a community and find a child below the age of 12 doing a labor, which is a child labor, so how can, as an organization, can we raise awareness and educate the community on child protection?
Okay, thank you very much. And this brings me back to the rings of responsibility that we talked about when looking at our framework. for protecting children within the sector with reference to child protection. And what we're saying is that we have different rings of responsibility. And permit me to use that reflection to answer your question. So, when we're talking about what we can do, of course, there's nothing we can do without getting the the support of our duty bearers. And of course, who are the duty bearers? We have the community and the religious stakeholders. We have teachers and different persons that work together to support the protection of children. So it means that when we want to drive this change, we must do that at all levels. With example, to your question, for example, on child labor, of course, we can also relate it to discipline using physical force. I wouldn't want to call that discipline anyway. I want to call that punishment, not discipline. The use of physical force to instill punishment on children. So we can do that at different levels. One, remember that we're raising awareness. We want people to be aware to take different action. We also need to let children know, and I'm coming maybe from the reverse order. We need to let children know that there are things that are acceptable, things that are unacceptable, and that these are the places where you can get help. Of course, when I start with this, our normal sense of being based on our socialization would be, oh, this Lisa, where is she even from? Maybe she's from US, Abby. This one that she's talking about educating children. So she wants children to rebel and to start reporting their parents to police. No, what I'm saying is that we want everyone to have the right information about their rights and their rights and responsibilities. So, of course, going beyond children, and that this also links to mainstreaming child protection across sectors. Going beyond children, we're talking about at the family level. And of course, we can do this through various means. For the children, maybe through life skill sessions, adolescent life skill sessions, or life skill sessions for children, or as part of general awareness in the community, or for child protection focused interventions as part of activities and awareness done in the child-friendly spaces. So we're saying beyond that, we're moving also to the family. We need to let parents know that there is a place for positive discipline, and that the anger that they exert, not only parents, adults, Rivka, it will interest you to know that even within organizations that have safeguarding policies, child safeguarding policies, sometimes you can see community volunteers or people that are tasked with responsibilities for caring for these children, or probably even some crowd control during maybe a distribution or an activity. You see them carrying big canes, and then you begin to wonder what is happening. So while I speak, I want us to know that there's a lot of change that's been happening in our communities because of the increase in knowledge and awareness about certain rights, privileges, responsibilities of different persons. We must also recognize that this is a gradual process and would not stop overnight. What does this mean? Even though there's been tremendous progress, we must not rest on our oars. We must continue to drive this change through our community-based mechanisms. Apart from talking to parents, talking to caregivers, talking to adults, we also have in some communities child protection committees instituted. Even within the school system, we have school-based management committees. All these committees, all these different people that come together to provide protection to the larger population, whether it's the vigilante, whether it's CJTF, and all different bodies. We're saying that we need to have an awareness session. And of course, not just one off, but we need to let people know the impact of their actions, and how that someone would say, for example, Lisa, I was beaten and that was why I was correct. No, it was not that you were beaten and that was why you're correct. It is what you are to say is that despite the fact that you were beaten, you still came out correct, because we recognize also that it is not the beating that makes you correct, but you tried through all that process to become a better person. So what we're saying, proceeding from the community, of course, when we talk about protective environment within the community, we have those that are tasked to provide protection, like I mentioned, also the police and all other people. And then we need to socialize, coming to the national level now, and even at state level, and even at international level, there are certain conventions that Nigeria has ratified. For example, the UNCRC. When it came back to Nigeria, we ratified that as the Child Rights Act 2003. And His Excellency, the Governor of Borno State, also, graciously assented to that policy. In Borno, however, it's not a Child Rights Act, it's a Child Protection Law. Whatever the name of the law is called, it is targeted about providing appropriate assistance, appropriate protection for children. So we need to socialize the provisions of some of these as well. By way of summary, if we want to see change in our communities, we must work at all levels, linking also to the efforts at the national level, linking also to efforts at the state level, linking also at the LGA level, linking also right to the community level. Everyone needs to be aware that because this is how we were brought up and this is how we're there are positive norms in the community, very excellent values in our communities that have helped us to develop to be who we are. We must come to the communities not with not as a fight against those policies that those cultural norms that exist, but even using those cultural norms as low-hanging fruit to get people to understand how we can be better if we take different action, and if we look at children from the rights-based approach and not infantilizing them, and by extension, with using our position of power and privilege unconsciously or consciously abuse them. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Ma, for this. You actually remind me of a courtesy visit that I once paid to a stakeholder on issues around child education and all that. What actually surprised me with what he said that all these INGOs and NGO are teaching children to rebel by giving them their rights and all that. So this is one of the issues we are having with some of our communities leaders and the stakeholders and the people in the community. So thank you so much, Ma, for this. With this, we have come to the end of our questions. So I don't know if Ezekiel can hear me or our ED can hear me, so she can put an input to this. And I don't know if there is access for those who can ask questions to you, Ma. Ezekiel?
Thank you so much, Rifkatu. Thank you again for having me.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma, for your time. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. So I don't know if there's room for questions. I'm not the host. I don't know if Ezekiel can hear me. Okay, hello, Ma. I guess with this we have come to the end of this section today because I didn't hear Ezekiel responding. So thank you so much, Ma, for your time, and we look forward to have you. And definitely, well, I will follow you up on the documents for safeguarding for our organization. Thank you so much, Ma, for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Rivka, too. I'm very grateful to the leadership of ZEGCAWIS for giving me this opportunity. If I may just say one final word to our listeners, we must recognize that whether we're talking about safeguarding within the community or whether we're talking about child protection or protection generally within the community, we all have a responsibility to report concerns. And this is because when we don't report concerns, the cycle of abuse continues. I was discussing, apologies, I know you have, my time is up, but
Yes,
just
it's okay,
one.
ma. It's okay, ma. You can
Just
go on.
one example. So I was discussing with a team, I cannot remember at which forum, but that colleague, okay, I remember now, that colleague was sharing an experience where he said he was discussing with a childhood friend, and that childhood friend had reported that she saw her teacher while she was in primary school. She saw her teacher abusing a pupil then in primary school, and she reported that incident, and she received the beating of her life. And almost 20 years later, between 15 to 20 years later, we're talking about this year now, she got back to that school, or she heard from that school that this teacher was caught in the act molesting a student. So what this means is two things, lessons that we're drawing from this story. Two things. One is that when we keep quiet, the impact is not just on us. And I'm saying, passionately appealing to parents, that it's not about Western ideas, it's not about NGOs, it's not about humanitarian work, it's not about development work. All we're saying is that collectively we want a safer society. Collectively we want a better humanity. Collectively we want a better environment where everyone is free from all forms of violence. And I believe that that is a shared responsibility for everyone. And when we keep quiet, when we decide not to take action, when we decide not to report for whatever reasons, when we say no, oh, if we report, the person may lose his job, or if this and this and that, and we have mercy per se to say on the perpetrator, that perpetrator may end up having harm to many other people. And I wonder how we would feel if we know that we had an opportunity to stop something and we didn't take appropriate action. Then another appeal that we're having, of course, I don't know who is listening, but to different persons, if it's organizations, that please, we need to take consent seriously. If it's also to the general public, that we need to create systems where people are able to develop some trust in reporting and, trust in ensuring that our concerns, when they are reported, would be taken seriously and there will be appropriate measures. And then the final word, if you allow me, is that we should all be our brothers and our sisters keeper, meaning we should not turn a blind eye when we see something happening, say, no, this is not within my organization, or no, this is not my child, or this is not this, or this is not that. Please, let's be watchful, because I believe that anyone who is listening is definitely passionate about providing protection and assistance to affected populations, or interested in seeing a safer society. So please, let's join hands together, because it requires collective effort. And let's see how together we can make the society that which we envision to see, a safer society, a peaceful society, a society that is free of violence and abuse. And of course, we do that by giving people the right information. When I was talking about informing children, I mentioned two things. I said their rights and responsibilities. So it's not just telling children about their rights, but their responsibilities also to their peers and to adults as well. So it's a mutual accountability. It's not a one-way drive when we're saying, oh, we're having child rights without having responsibilities. It's what we're saying is that we're working hand in hand just like the left and the right leg, we're creating a balance between all that we're doing to ensure that children are kept safe, particularly, and by extension, talking about the general population or within organizations, children and program participants. But I would just like to, with a final, I know I've been saying final for some time now, but with a final voice, just cry out to say that we need to hold hands together to ensure that everyone is taking their own part in ensuring that we are having a better society. Thank you very much, and that's all from me.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma, for this final word. I think that this is a call to action to everyone, not only ZEGCAWIS, but everyone listening to this and to our parents in the community. As for ZEGCAWIS, we will take this responsibility and be accountable to ourselves to ensure that our program participants, the people we are working with, have the knowledge of our safeguarding and child protection policy. So please, to our listeners, if you see, okay, Rifkatu or anyone in ZEGCAWIS, okay, perpetrating safeguarding concern or child protection concern, please feel free to report us without, okay, even if you are my family member, you see me in the community outside ZEGCAWIS perpetrating child protection, it is our responsibility to report that person to better our society, just as Lisa said. So thank you so much, Ma, for your time. We look forward to have you once again and to inform people of our responsibility to our society. Thank you so much, and thank you, our listener. So see you.
Hi, Rifkatu. Sorry,
Ma?
if I may just mention something. You said if people see you within your community, within the community perpetrating this, I would just like to say, by way of summary, talking about for safeguarding is clear, all forms of violence against children, and it's not only within the community, even while you're at home. Yes. Even while you're on leave, so just to say that it is not only while we are within the communities, anywhere we are, as long as we bear an identity of a humanitarian or a development worker, there are things we must say no to and things that must be reported. But in 2 minutes, permit me to just by way of summary, summarize the core principles on safeguard, on what do they call it, PSHA, so that people also know what it is that can be reported. So we are saying that any sexual activity, with any individual below the age of 18, whether the person is involved in a humanitarian work or not, whether I travel to Enugu and I have any relationship with anyone under the age of 18, it is prohibited, whether I know the age of the child or not, meaning that mistaken belief in the age of the child is not an excuse. So we are saying also beyond that, now bringing that to the context of where we work, any sexual activity with program participants and affected populations, are unacceptable and are also acts of gross misconduct, meaning that any sexual activity, whether it is sex or inappropriate touch or sexually provocative behavior with a program participant, regardless of their age, exchange of money, food, employment, goods, assistance, and services for sex or sexual favors is totally prohibited. With all due respect to commercial sex workers or sex workers, any sexual activity with sex workers by humanitarian organizations or members of humanitarian organizations is actually prohibited as well. And any sexual activity that is forced upon a person, whether the person is a program participant or has any relationship with our work or not. So using a child or adult to procure sex for others, and for some child-focused organizations like Plan, accessing, downloading, creating, or distributing child pornography or abusive images of children or young people. Again, we're saying that there's a mandatory obligation for all humanitarian workers. Even as I was passionately pleading, I know that by our policies, we are mandated to report any concerns. And we must not be sure if this concern is true or not. We must not be sure whether the concern is a violation or not. It's not also our duty to identify witnesses. It is our duty to report what we know. If we have any concerns or suspicions, we must report what we know. Every organization has administrative processes that will look into the matter and take appropriate action as per their findings. Thank you very much. And finally, it is over from my end. Thank you. Hi, Rifkatu, I think you're muted.
Okay, so sorry. Okay, thank you so much, Ma, for this. Okay, just as you said, safeguarding policies and child protection policies is not limited only to us in the organization, but including our private lives and wherever we go in the different content or country we find ourselves as a humanitarian actor or as an individual of the society. We should take a safeguarding concern a serious issue. So thank you so much, Ma, for this. With this, we have come to the end of our today's series. Thank you so much, and I'll look forward to have you all in the next week's series. Thank you so much, Ma.
Thank you, Ma.